Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we have a special guest. But in order to have a special guest, it is customary to have a special host. I would like to introduce you to our special host for a coffee table chat. This woman is a formidable leader, a gem in the crown of the Central Bank of Nigeria, our prized possession. She's an exemplary leader of over 3,000 female staff at the Central Bank. She's an evergreen champion of gender equality. She's a stellar performer, a reformer, and a transformer. She is accomplished and incomparable, a trailblazer, high achieving, with several industry awards, recognitions, and accolades to her name. She is a chartered financial analyst, a chartered alternative investment analyst. She is an alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School in the US, INSEAD in France, Cranfield School of Management in the UK, just to mention a few. She is the Deputy Governor in charge of financial system stability, and she is Mrs. Aisha Ndanusa Ahmad, CFA. I would like to introduce her so that she can bring on a guest for a very special coffee table chat. Please welcome Mrs. Aisha Ahmad.
Thank you very much, Ngozi. Good morning, everyone. The Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Honorable Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Mrs. Miriam Kachagum, our special guest speaker, the Deputy Governors at the Central Bank, the board members of the Central Bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As always, I'm very, very excited to welcome you to the 2023 Central Bank of Nigeria International Women's Day commemorative event, where the CBN joins the world to acknowledge the social, economic, cultural, political achievements of women and commit to gender parity and representation of women in leadership across the public and private sectors. I think this year's UN theme, Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Parity, is very appropriate. We've seen how digital technology has more or less permeated every aspect of our lives: health, education, financial services, retail, you name it, it's digital. And in the context of this digital mainstreaming, unfortunately, women are less likely than men to have access to technology and to be able to leverage its benefits to change their economic circumstances. And the cost can really be significant. There's a recent research by, I think, the World Wide Web Foundation that showed that low-income countries lost, not lose, because this was just in 1 year. Low-income countries in 2020 alone lost $126 billion in GDP because of this due to gender gap. Notwithstanding that we need to close the gap to ensure women are not left out, I think technology and innovation are not just elements that would help prevent gender exclusion. They can be important levers to actually promote greater gender parity. Over COVID, we saw how technology helped us overcome some stereotypes and biases that women often face in lending practices and in some workplace environments. And we think at the CBN that achieving 95% financial inclusion and leveraging digital financial services will be important on that journey. We focused on excluded segments like women, youth, and rural dwellers. And we think that digital financial services, which leverages technology and innovation to deliver and promote widespread access to financial services, is the way to go. So today's webinar that features quite an impressive lineup of influential speakers is just the right place to go into this topic. Could this technology and innovation be the missing ingredient in all of our digital gender mainstreaming efforts thus far? Could it be the magic wand that we're looking for? And I look forward to having this conversation. So to our special guest, I am now very particularly proud to host this virtual coffee table chat. I'm supposed to be on a table with our special guest with coffee in between us. But since it's virtual, we'll do the same thing. She in her location and me in my location, and we'll drink the coffee. She's a lady that has a very interesting career path and a very unique passion. We have the rare opportunity of hearing from a very inspiring female leader. She was Nigeria's first ever Minister for Communication and Technology. She is one of the leading female tech investors. She's currently senior partner at the groundbreaking venture capital firm TLCom Capital. She's a co-founder of Women in Management, Business and Public Service. And that it really, really gives me great pleasure and honor to invite to join me on this coffee table, the humble, inspiring, and accomplished Dr. Omobola Johnson.
Good morning. Good morning, Aisha. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Dr. Johnson. First of all, I want to thank you very, very much for accepting our invitation on relatively short notice on a day that is personally significant for you. I know you're due to travel, but you still made time to prepare and be with us today, and we really appreciate it. On behalf of all of us at the Central Bank, we appreciate your presence here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So, I know we're here to talk about technology, and it's an area that you have a lot of experience and passion for. But I think we should start with a warm-up question around your career trajectory. Because I think that from the time when you were a leading consultant working in the consulting space to when you moved into policy making, being the first Nigerian Minister for Communications, and then now pivoting into the tech space. And also speak to us about that trajectory. And I'm particularly interested to know why you moved from you have a bachelor's in electrical and electronics, you have a master's in digital electronics, and then you recently did a doctorate in business administration. Just walk us through that trajectory.
Okay, so this is a 35-year plus career journey. I'm going to try and summarize it into a minute or two. As you said, I started my career in tech. I studied engineering at university. I then joined, it was Arthur Andersen then, but I joined the information consulting division as a software developer. So I spent my early years in Arthur Andersen or Andersen Consulting, Accenture, as a software engineer. And after that, moved into process, which was again, technology related, but using technology to make processes and companies more efficient. Fast forward a few years, I moved sort of out of technology and more into strategy and enterprise transformation and program management. And I think I ended my career in Accenture then very much as a partner that was really looking over some very major transformation projects, including one at CBN. I think it was called Project Eagles then, for those of you that remember. After that, I got tapped on the shoulder and was asked to join the cabinet of President Jonathan. Interestingly, it was again that technology thread was running through my career after leaving Accenture and taking an early retirement. And I was very the Pioneer Minister of Communication Technology, which was a very proud moment for me. But I had to brush up on my tech when I was taking on this role, because I kind of moved away from tech and started more of the sort of business management and strategy consulting. So brushed up on my tech, spent 4 years as Minister of Communication Technology. And then as I was thinking of what I would do after ministry, because I wasn't definitely going to go into retirement, one thing that really excited me was really the very beginnings of what I saw was an emerging tech VC industry, really supporting entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs in Nigeria or across the continent to really begin to innovate around technology and use technology to solve what I'd call some of the grand challenges that we have across the continent and in Nigeria. Grand challenges around health, around financial services, around education, and using technology to do that. And my doctorate was very much informed by what I learned or what I saw when I was a consultant. Like I said, I was doing very much strategy consulting, program management, and the topic of my doctorate then was around leadership in emerging markets, because I saw that there was a difference between how we as leaders behave because of the context in which we operate. It's a context where, policy changes are rampant. It's a context where infrastructure is not there. It's a context where talent is not always, what you want it to be. It's not always there. There are huge talent gaps. So what do we as leaders need to do in emerging markets to be more effective? That was my my doctorate. I'm using it now to a certain extent because I'm using it to support entrepreneurs and CEOs in the companies that we fund at TLCom to really help them to be better CEOs. So that's sort of 35 plus years in a few minutes.
In one sound bite. Now, let me just quickly pick up on one or two things you said. Because for me, I think, yes, now, this whole conversation about digital and technology and women is more mainstream, and it's more, as technology has evolved and as innovation has permeated everything, it's obvious. But when you studied tech, you were probably amongst very few women. What was that environment like? Because clearly you must have been a pioneer in that space. We don't, even today, we're still talking about getting more women in tech and STEM. Can you speak to sort of the gender context when you were studying and how that has evolved today?
In my engineering class at the university, I think there were 3 of us in a class of 100, 3 women. And interestingly, my daughter went to the same university, University of Manchester, studied engineering. She studied chemical. I studied electrical and electronics, studied chemical engineering. And, this is 25 years or so later, she was still only 5 in a class of 100. So, we have a lot of work to do in terms of getting women into the field of STEM. But, for me, I never really saw, yes, there was that, definitely I was, one of 3 in a class of 100. And that sort of continued in my career. In Arthur Andersen then, or Andersen Consulting Accenture, there were very few women in the sort of systems integration practice. And that continued even as Minister of Communication Technology. I was in an industry that was very male dominated. I think the way that I've always looked at it is that, look, I'm here for a reason, I'm here for a purpose. And there are a number of things that I've always done. I've always endeavored to do my best. I have the training, the background, the pedigree, whatever it is, to really strive to be the best, regardless of what field it is in. I never really got caught up in the gender biases or the gender constructs, because I just thought, look, I was raised as a human being. Even in Arthur Andersen in the early days, we were called Arthur androids, which meant that there was no gender discrimination. My parents raised me as a human being. There was no female or male, or there was none of that when I was growing up. So I didn't have that context of gender. And I took that sort of neutral gender context, if you can phrase it like that, into the world of work. So I didn't see discrimination, which was a bit stupid, to be honest. I kind of brushed it off, but I think I got probably quite high in my career when I realized that actually there is gender discrimination. I was very fortunate to have very strong mentors and coaches throughout my career. I got to probably when I was partner, when I realized that, my goodness, there's actually gender discrimination. I was speaking to younger women who were experiencing this in their own careers and whatever they were doing. And that was the motivation for actually starting Wimbiz and beginning to give back, even though I didn't experience it personally. Yes. I felt that it has been experienced by other women, and you must do something about it because it's, because you have the network and the passion and the interest to do something about it.
Yes. In fact, so interesting, auto androids. That's the word I'll
That's
keep.
what we're called.
Yes. And then it's also interesting to see how, organizations and leaders connect, because to hear that you were part of Project Eagle in some form is just a nice way of connecting all of this. And I think the last question I asked you is a good segue into the next question I want to ask you, which is that you're fortunate to have a background that, encouraged your aspirations, regardless of, and your aspiration was STEM. And I think you've publicly talked about how STEM education is very important and getting more women in STEM education. Given the fact that, okay, you were unique in terms of your trajectory, what do you think we can do today to get more women in STEM, from the educational perspective, right up to participating and working in technology, to investing and being represented? There's a lot of talk today about how Africa is the hotbed of a lot of tech innovation and attracting a lot of tech capital, but that capital is flowing, has a gender gap in there. So can you speak to that whole value chain from education to investment?
Yeah. Look, it's a great question, and it's a very big question. I think the first thing I would say is that, how do we get more women in STEM? It sounds like a catchy phrase, but it's catch them young. And we need to encourage young girls as they enter into primary school, secondary school, university, to encourage them into the field of STEM. And that needs some active, intentional, deliberate action, because it's not something that comes naturally. People don't want their children to be engineers or scientists, because they feel as if those are sort of hard careers, they're challenging, they're male dominated. So first of all is to make sure that we make it interesting and attractive for young girls to study science subjects, interesting and attractive for young girls to move to university and study science subjects. And one of the ways we do that is to create role models. So I was very much, not that I wanted to be, but I had to accept that I was a role model for many of these young girls. And we did that while I was in the Ministry of Communication Technology, creating these digital girls clubs, going to some of the girls schools across Abuja in the Federal Capital Territory and in Niger State, just showing them that, a woman can be the Minister of Communication Technology and she doesn't have two heads or four arms or whatever it is. So that role modeling is very important. And we try and do that for many women that are in STEM. Be out there, talk about the work that you do. Talk about how you enjoy that work, talk about your career journey, because that's important, because women respond more to role modeling than just telling them things. So I think that was that second thing I think that we can do. First of all, catch them young, and some role modeling. I think what is important, exactly when you talk about investments in female-led technology firms, we are just as underrepresented in this particular industry as we are in many aspects of, social, economic life, whatever it is. And there are two ways in which we can help that to happen. The first is to, again, using these sound that we use phrases, being intentional and deliberate about it. At TLCom Capital, we have a certain portion of our fund that is actually reserved to invest in female-led technology companies. So because we have that portion reserved, we have to make a special effort to go find these female founders. There are not many of them, to find them, nurture them to the point where they can be investable. The second thing, which is actually quite important, is to have more females that are allocators of that capital, because there is the unconscious bias of people investing in people that look like them, think like them, act like them. So if I'm a male venture capital investor, I would tend to look for male founders and invest in them. But if I'm a female venture capital investor, I would tend to look for female female entrepreneurs and invest in them. So that, again, creating more opportunities for women to be allocators of capital, and definitely supporting female founders in their quest to build their companies, allocating capital to them and ensuring that they have the right levels of mentorship and coaching and support to be able to build great technology companies.
Thank you. Do you think that, because we've seen some research that showed that when it comes to financial services, particularly lending, where we want women to get more loans, that women tend to do better. Have you seen in your experience supporting female-led tech organizations? Have you seen any differences in either the value they create? Is there any unique benefits to the gender leadership or the difference in gender leadership when it comes to female tech companies?
That's a tough one. I would like to think not. Because one of the things, maybe I didn't say this, but when we go and invest in female tech entrepreneurs, we want them to be just as good as their male counterparts. But it just takes a lot harder to find them. So there's no, when we invest in female tech entrepreneurs, there's no difference between themselves and males in terms of the quality of the female founders themselves and the way that they're going about building their companies.
Are they better?
I would like to say yes.
Exactly.
But
That's what I was
think
going. Are they better? Is there an advantage?
I don't, are they better? They're different in the way that they want to build their businesses. I think they are. Are they better? You know, time will tell, because we don't have enough. Even in our current portfolio, we have 2 female founders and 9 male founders. Now, interestingly, to your question, the 2 female founders are doing extremely well. One of them is, you may, some of the people on the call may know about her. That's Farah Ditabo, who's the founder of a
Yes, Farah.
fintech called Okra. Yes, Okra, doing very, very well and creating a lot of value in the financial services industry. The other one is Rose Goslinga, who is doing it's an agri-tech company, insurance for small-scale farmers, again doing extremely well in that field and serving millions of farmers across the continent. So they're doing very well, but you know, time will tell whether they'll be the ones that will deliver the unicorns for TLCom or not. But yes, we've chosen them well. Let me say it like that.
I think that's a good way to say it. I just wanted to ensure that everyone on this call should know that, you know, they may be missing something if they don't have, you know, a diverse portfolio when they're investing, and female-led organizations, you know, should work. And I think the conversation that we have about getting more female businesses from being on the small and micro level to a point where they can attract foreign capital remains a conversation we should be having, or else they won't be visible to companies like TLCom Capital.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move quickly to financial services, because it's a big area for us at the Central Bank of Nigeria. We think that, you know, Nigeria's financial system should be open and accessible to everyone, because we know what having access to financial services does, not just for personal incomes, you know, but for economic participation. There's a gender gap in financial service today in Nigeria. It's 8%. So out of men have more access than women. You should put that side by side with the fact that when it comes to digital and tech, Nigeria is actually very well positioned, even better positioned by other African countries on the continent, better positioned by even some offshore jurisdictions. So what are we missing in actually marrying that great opportunity? It's not even an opportunity, it's now becoming a reality. Because if you say 5 out of 7 African unicorns are in Nigeria, then perhaps we shouldn't be having the kinds of exclusion levels that we have for women. So can you speak to that area, and what are we doing well and what are we missing, and how can we solve this financial exclusion, relatively lower inclusion levels for women once and for all?
You know, earlier on, we spoke about getting more women into the field of tech. I think that's one. But I think the other, and the sort of broader and more difficult thing to do, is to get women to be more comfortable and familiar with technology. We tend to run away or shy away from technology. And that's one thing. I really, it's to institutions like the Central Bank of Nigeria, who have a very specific gender focus in some of the policies I hear you talk about, is really figure out a way to get these women digital skills that they require, digital skills to be able to participate, to be consumers of content and finances, whatever it is on the internet. That's one thing. It's very important to do that and get them more comfortable with that technology. I think you made a point in your opening remarks that talked about, you know, the women on this platform are in a privileged position because we're not afraid of technology. We use technology every day, but the majority of women in this country are mostly in the rural areas, don't have access, even though there's infrastructure that supports them in terms of, you know, a 3G, 4G, 5G signal wherever they live. They don't have access to that mobile phone, which is the critical thing for us to begin to even talk about inclusion. So that's the first thing we need to do. Ensure that women have access to digital infrastructure through mobile phones. And it comes through various ways. One of the biggest ways in which we can do that is to ensure that, you know, there is content that actually is relevant to them. So let me just give a quick example of, for instance, the insurance company I was talking about that provides insurance to small-scale farmers. You know, if you give a female farmer a mobile phone, she can use that mobile phone to actually access agricultural subsidies, inputs, whether it is seed or fertilizer, whatever it is. It's relevant to her because she's farming. If you give a woman a mobile phone and she has access to content around health, maternal health, And that happened in Ondo State, where Ondo State actually reduced mental health by simply giving pregnant women mobile phones. If you give them mobile phones, however it is, whether through subsidies or instrumental payments, and put on those mobile phones content that is relevant to them, that's where we begin to really solve the inclusion problem. Because for as long as it's relevant to them, they will use that phone. Now, if you're using it for insurance, you're going to use it for health. If you're using it for health, you're going to use it for financial services, or vice versa. So I think that's the second thing we need to do, making content that is relevant for female, particularly those that are not as conversant or those that are not as comfortable with technology as those of us on this platform are. And it's one thing, so let me just finally say, the last thing I'll say is, it's one thing that we also look at in the fund, not so much females, not so much female entrepreneurs, but any entrepreneur, when you're solving a problem or solving a challenge, is it a challenge that actually affects a lot of people? And in that lot of people, are there enough women included in that challenge you're solving? And if you look at it, many of the challenges we're faced with in the continent today are those that involve tens of millions of people: access to financial services, access to health, access to education. But there's got to be that little push to make it more relevant and more important for women to actually want to have that access.
Fantastic. I think something you said that is really, relevant. And I think it reminds me that, we often, particularly on this side of the table where we're doing financial policy, we often look at digital platforms as the route to financial inclusion and the route to financial access. But I think you've talked about a lot of other outcomes, social outcomes, talking around health, education that women need, because that also ties in, to family planning and, GDP outcomes in terms of how we want to structure the economy, stuff around other practices, even in terms of farming, for example. We look at stuff like improving yields. Yield losses have been a key challenge for many African economies. But that channel, that mobile phone, that mobile channel can be the platform which you actually teach more than just finance, but every other aspect that you want to teach. And I think something else that has come out of what you said, and I think we try to challenge a lot of our licensees, there's a lot of attraction for Nigeria as a destination to put in some innovative financial products to solve problems. But something that you said that was really, really key is that in thinking about innovation, you must be thinking about inclusive innovation. And that's how I paraphrase what you have said. So if you're a tech investor, you're someone looking to come in to set up a payment company in Nigeria, and you're talking about your impact, it cannot just be, we're looking at 200 million people. As you grow and as you scale, we want to see gender representation in what you do. And I think that's a really powerful outcome. Let's switch from tech and finance, because I know we need to round up, and there are two important questions I still need to ask you. Let's talk about leadership. In a recent tweet of yours, you talked about, you quoted another person's tweet. I think they were, the individual was talking about a visit that they had to a policymaker. And you said, when opportunity meets preparation, you can and should speak truth to power. Can you share an example for us of a time when you were prepared to speak truth to power, maybe in your past time in the policy space or today? And what was the opportunity? How did it arise? And how did the women on this call, in fact, everyone on this call, how can they do that as well?
Yeah. Let me just quickly talk about the context of that tweet. And it's so terrible. Whatever you share on social media, be careful, because you'll be quoted back at you. So the context was my colleague, the telecom partner in Nairobi, she's from Zimbabwe. But she lives in Nairobi. She's married to a Kenyan. And the president of Zimbabwe was visiting Kenya. And he came to the innovation hub where the telecom offices are located. And she had the opportunity or the privilege of taking him around the hub. And he was very impressed. And she said to him, this is Kenya. Kenya receives X billion dollars of investment from VC funds and all of that. But, my country, our country, Zimbabwe, we need to do more. And she actually challenged the president of Zimbabwe. And that was really speaking truth to power, because she had the opportunity to take him around and really speak truth to power. So I was very excited when I saw her tweet, and I sort of retweeted it. But to your question around truth to power, the one example I can think about is when, obviously, when I was Minister of Communication Technology, and it was, 2011, 2015 was at the height of the Boko Haram insurgency and terrorism. the army was really sort of struggling to, to contain this threat to the country and all of that. And I remember being summoned into the office of the NSA at that point in time. I was, as Minister of Communication Technology, we must be able to do something from a tech perspective. And as I entered into the office, seated with the NSA were all the, what do they call it now, chiefs of defense staff, chief of naval staff, chief of army staff. They were all seated there. And here was little old me, coming to be grilled. And basically what they wanted, which was, nothing wrong with what they wanted, was how can the telecommunications companies support them in the fight against this Boko Haram insurgency? And, as things are, it was more around, how could they get funds? Because of course, as you know, the telecoms companies are seen as the cash cows, what were the ways in which they could get funds from the companies? And I then went into this lecture about how, well, there was a way that we could do. We can't just ask them for money. We've got to, it's got to be things that are related to the work that they do and all that. And I was basically telling them that, no, you can't do this. You can't do it like this. You got to do it in a certain way. And I saw, they're all looking at me quite bemused, thinking,
were you the only woman in the room?
I was the only woman in the room. There were just 6 of us in the room. So it wasn't like a big audience. It was NSA,
Yes.
the 5 chiefs of staff, and myself. And, I had to explain to them that this is not how it works. These are private companies and, and everything. I was, getting very, very philosophical and intellectual
Yes.
and all of that. And I think at the end of my speech, the NSA said to me, Madam Minister, who do you work for? The Nigerian government or the telecoms companies? And I had to say, both, to be honest. I've been given the job by President Jonathan to superintend these companies, and I need to make sure that they have everything they need to grow and to survive and everything. But of course, I'm the Minister of Communication Technology. I have a role that I play in terms of tech in government and everything. So I'm doing both, But that was speaking truth to power, and that was saying to people that didn't understand how these things worked, that you cannot do this. This is the way you do it. This is not the way they do it. So that was speaking truth to power. Luckily for me, there were no consequences. I guess my advice was heeded. At the end of the day, there were no consequences. But what I will say, Aisha, is that it's important to speak truth to power. When you have the opportunity, it's important to speak truth to power. But it comes from a place of confidence that you're ready to face whatever the consequences are when you speak truth to power. It comes from a place of knowledge. So when you're speaking truth to power, you're speaking from a place of knowledge. You're not just, getting emotional or whatever. You're just speaking from a place of knowledge. So when you're challenged, you can then also challenge and push back. And also, when you're speaking truth to power, you got to also have a, what would I call it? A network around you that will support you. Because I knew that even as I was speaking to those very important personnel in our defense infrastructure, I knew that if I went back and spoke to whoever, other ministers, even the president himself, I would get the right levels of support. So I think those are the 3 things I would say, that you don't go speaking truth to power without thinking about all of these things, because it may be, because there are consequences when you do that. So just be careful about it and do it with confidence, with knowledge, and also with knowledge that you have some backing as you speak truth to power.
Yes, I think that you said there were no consequences. I think there were no negative consequences, but there was a positive consequence and outcome, because they not only took your advice, but you gave them a new perspective that they would definitely have used in another context, understanding that, okay, a federal minister may have a dual role to protect the primary, should I say, the primary ecosystem that you have oversight for, and in the context of the broader objective. So I think that was good. And I like your 3 points: the knowledge, the confidence, and having a network, of supportive people around the room. And I guess that network you build one by one, I guess, before you enter the room.
Oh, yes.
Yes, definitely. I promised 2 more questions, and I'm supposed to give you 1 more question, but sorry, there was one I forgot, because I think that today you're celebrating a very important man in your life. And I think he was also pivotal in encouraging you to take this path, which has worked very well, not just for you, but for this country and for STEM. What is the role of men? What has been the role of men in your life, and what do you think in your trajectory and in your successes, and what do you think men can do in this effort to get women more included in the digital world?
Let me just give the example of the 4 men that have actually supported me in my career and and my success to date. I mean, the first, as you say, was my father, who was celebrating 10 years of his passing. That's why I'm sort of getting in the car as soon as we're done with this to travel to Ondo. My father raised us all as he told us that we could do anything we wanted to do and we could be anything we wanted to be. There was no gender bias. I have two brothers and 4 sisters, and there was absolutely no difference in the way that we were raised. So that was the first thing. So I entered the world of work thinking I can do anything, I can be anything, and nobody can stop me because my daddy said so. That's the first thing. The second thing was, while I was in Accenture, where I spent sort of 25 years of my career, I had 2 very strong supporters. Again, some of you may know them, Dr. Sulaiman and Dick Kramer of blessed memory. These are 2 men that were so supportive of my career. They were my mentors, they were my coaches, they were my cheerleaders, everything you can ever imagine. Dotto and Dick were those for me. The fourth person I would talk about, the fourth man in my life, is my husband, who again, very importantly, has supported me in my career. We had 3 children, raising children, having a career, being very busy, not being at home all the time, traveling a lot. My husband was absolutely fantastic. He was just a rock. He would encourage me to travel, because I know I would always try and spend the least nights away from home as possible. And when I did that, I missed out on the networking, because people would network before the event, they would network after the event. I'd fly in the morning, fly back. He said, don't be silly. Just go the day before, network, do everything you need to do, and then come back. So he did that. He did that for me. And I guess also, my husband has never been intimidated by what I do or who I am. I think for me, it's very important that you can be minister, chairman, whatever it is, but you're my wife. And that's how our relationship has always been. So that's, and I would say, as I give those examples, I think I've answered the question around what do I think men should do? I think men should go out of their way to support and mentor women that they find, the high performing women that they find wherever they are, and go out of their way to consciously support them, encourage them, coach them, mentor them. For the men that have daughters, do exactly what my father did. Raise them as human beings. Raise them like you raise your sons. Tell them they can be anything and do anything they want to be, regardless of what it is. For those of you that are husbands and your wives are in careers, whatever their careers may be, support them from day one, and don't be intimidated by their success, because their success is your success, as I have found. So that's really what I would say.
This is really, really powerful. And I like the way you've sort of broken it down into sort of your roots in terms of your dad, your professional mentors, and then your personal, your spouse. And I can share that. I share that sentiment that your spouse may be one of the most important career decisions a woman makes, not just in terms of supporting you and telling you can do this, but picking up, that shared responsibility when you need to. Unfortunately,
and I know that your spouse supports you very well.
Exactly, he does.
So him at all the women's events.
He's always at all those events, because unfortunately, there's still this general societal belief that all of the caregiving, not just for the children, but for the aged parents, lies with the woman. So if you can have a forward-thinking spouse that understands that he has to pick up his part, can be very beneficial for everyone. And thank you for laying that out for us. So, I cannot leave this conversation without talking about WIMBIZ. I'm sure everyone on the call is wondering, when do we get to this WIMBIZ conversation? Because that is where we share a strong history. That is where we first met. That is where we shared our passion for changing the world in terms of giving women opportunity. And I think your role in WIMBIZ and the conversation about WIMBIZ is also one of those early things. Because I know now it is fashionable to have women's groups and to have, workshops and to have all of these things. But when WIMBIZ started in 2001, it was pretty novel. So can you tell us about this WIMBIZ idea? Tell us what we don't know, what many people don't know, how we started, and then end with your view of sort of groups like that. Are they still relevant today? Is there something else we should be doing? The floor is yours.
The greatest story about WIMBIZ is that WIMBIZ was actually, first of all, initiated by a man and sort of cooked and nurtured whatever in a kitchen. So that, I think that's such a good story. It was a colleague of mine in Accenture, Chichi Okonjo, who had been to a conference in South Africa, a women's conference in South Africa, and said, we must do this in Nigeria. And he came to me and says, look, Omobola, what do you think about this, a women's conference in Nigeria? Because it never been done before. I said, oh, this is fantastic. Went into Moi Babalola's kitchen, or Moi Desalu now, with my sister, Yewande Zacchaeus. We're in her kitchen thinking, this is such a good idea. Who should we bring on to join us in this? And then we ended up with 12 other 12 women and 1 man on the WIMBIZ board of trustees. And the idea then was to first of all start with we had a very big mission, which is, as you know, to elevate the profile and influence of women in management and business. That was a big vision that we had, because we knew that women really were not, they were not pulling their, pulling their weights. They were being underrepresented. And we say, you know what, all of the women in WIMBIZ then were in, fairly substantial positions. I was MD of Accenture, Bola Adishola was MD of Kakawa Discount House, my sister, Billy Awishika. All those people were women of substance, even then, we were all in our sort of 40s, early 40s to late 40s. And we came together, we held a big first conference, very successful. Fast forward, 20 years, where what we've done successfully is, first of all, WIMBIZ has become a brand. It's a brand that represents women in management, in business, in politics, in government. As you know, Aisha, we've actually expanded the role of WIMBIZ over the years. And then what we've also done is actually taken, it's not just about conferences, it's about how women think. It's about how women are inspired by coming to any of our events, when they see women that look like them, talk like them, who are very successful. It's about addressing issues that are relevant for women. All those things are really, really important. Advocacy is very important. Just very quickly, I was sitting with the MD of Guinness just a couple of days ago, and he told me, again, talking about the event that they had, it was saying, the biggest problem we have with gender representation is that by law, we're not allowed to have women work on shifts in our factories. Because the law, the gender-based law says that, oh, no, women cannot work shifts and everything, so they can't. And so now we're working with Guinness to advocate that this law should be abolished and let women choose whether they want to work in shifts or not. So just talking about advocacy as well, and really pushing for things to be an enabling environment that will enable women, that will help women to succeed and to grow. Of course, WIMBIZ is 21 years old, very proud of what we have accomplished, influence and supported thousands of women. Very proud of the fact that you are one of the executive chairpersons, and the fact that WIMBIZ has gone from generation to generation. It just keeps renewing itself. I'm just amazed at what we've been able to do, and stepping back now, very, very, very proud of it.
Yes, in fact, I'm definitely part of that story. I remember at my time as chair, we're thinking about how to make it more inclusive. It goes in waves. How do we get the younger generation in? And that was when we started thinking more also about CSR, the Big Sister program, going in, being, advocates. I love what you said about, it's not just about the conference, because people see it as, okay, it's the largest conference. Indeed, I think in Africa, the largest conference of the most accomplished women in business, public service and in careers and entrepreneurs that you can find anywhere. People marvel at that. Well, I think it is inspiration. I agree with you. It is that feeling in the room, the energy, the can-do spirit that women come out with. They see other women like them, and these women are telling them, I'm not special. You can do the same thing I did. I think that's the biggest thing about the WIMBIZ story. And I agree with you on the advocacy, using our platforms to achieve greatness. I don't know if people missed what you said. It was started by a man and cooked in a kitchen. And there's sort of nothing else tells you that all spaces matter, all genders matter, and all spaces matter. And we can use our power wherever it is we are, in the kitchen, or if we're a man, we can have an idea that transforms the female gender. Thank you. I want to thank you especially for taking up that idea, getting the people together to put it together. And I think one of the biggest lessons about WIMBIZ as well, I think, is the succession. So that is not a gender issue, but I think having a seamless succession and having it implemented is lead to longevity in institutions. And if you have not thought about it already, I think you should think about a case study of the whole project.
Actually, the Lagos Business School is writing a case study for us.
Oh, they are? Okay,
they
perfect.
Are, yes.
Perfect.
They are.
I look forward to reading it. So I promised you 11.
Yes.
And I'm 3 minutes over. And I try to keep my promises. So I really need to cut it short here. I will say thank you to you. And I'll give you a chance to, you want to say any last closing remarks before I formally thank you?
Well, what I would say is that, well, first of all, thank you Central Bank of Nigeria for doing this and celebrating women on International Women's Day and bringing up the issues that really concern us. But one thing I would say is that it's always good to raise the issues in the month of March, because that's the International Women's Month, literally, as if you want to call it that. But I think one thing we need to do is just to keep these issues front and center throughout the year. These issues matter throughout the year, whether it is inclusiveness, empowerment, support, whatever it is. I would just encourage us to keep it front and center. And for the women that are in the audience, what I would say is that, look, you can be anything that you want to be. I've been very privileged and very blessed to be MD of a significant corporate organization, to be a minister, now a senior partner in a significant VC fund. And I think just to prove that, I had an education just like everybody else. It wasn't about blind ambition. I worked very hard to get to where I was, but I had a lot of support. So look for that support, seek it out, look for that support. Don't be afraid to ask for help from men, from women, from whoever, because anybody that will help you to advance your career, I think is very important. So encouragement to some of the more junior women in the organization. And thanks to you, Aisha, for being a role model for many people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Johnson. Thank you. So let me formally, on behalf of the governor and the board and everybody, Central Bank of Nigeria and the staff, thank you for taking out time to speak to us so eloquently, so honestly, so passionately about this very, very important topic. I want to crave your indulgence. The Minister of State for Industry would like to say a few words. If you don't mind, Dr. Johnson, I know you have to travel now. You should just say a few words whilst you're here. We'll take our shot and you'll be off. Does that work?
All right, no, fine, that's perfect.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister Ma, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead,
Yes.
Ma.
Yes, thank you very much, Aisha, and thank you, Dr. Mobola Johnson. I was really pleased I was able to listen to you and learn of your experiences. But also, just to go back a bit, to thank the Central Bank for inviting me to this particular event. In fact, I've attended quite a number of events this month, and I'm really pleased that the International Women's Day in Nigeria is gathering momentum. And just to say a word or two about the topic, some of the things I've listened to, yes, education is key, not just looking at STEM, but now we talk about STEAM because of the artistic aspect. And you'll find that a lot of our women are into the creative arts. So we do try to encourage them, because these are things they could do while at home and be able to make some income. But some of the things I heard from other platforms from the beginning of the month is trying to reach those unreached women. There are a lot of women that do not have access. Some may have the digital skills, but they do not have access to financial services. And when we did a kind of rough mapping, there are a lot of parts of this country where banks do not exist. There are no other financial services, except maybe your POS guy. So I think the central bank, being the regulatory agency, needs to do something about getting financial services to the nooks and crannies of the country. Then also there was the issue of skills development, not just the digital skills, not just digital skills for financial services, but digital skills that would enable a woman who has a small business to be able to go into an ecosystem, make her business grow and flourish, be able to network, be able to place her orders for items, because we've spoken a lot in some of the International Women's Day activities, how they can access the AFCFTA, how can they do their transactions, issue of shipments and so on. And you'll be surprised, I've met a lot of women that really are struggling. They have products, they don't know how to access platforms, and we're trying to get them through SMEDAN, through the Industrial Training Fund, and as well as the Bank of Industry, to try and give them some kind of training and access and network, so that they're able, with very minimal literacy, to be able to go on platforms and make these contacts. And I think the final thing for me is to say the CBN also should invest in education. Dr. Omobola Johnson has spoken about catching them young. We really need to invest in education, even if it means taking it at the higher level, master trainers that will teach science, technology, and innovation, because really that's from where the kids will catch up. So thank you very much, CBN. And I think the last one, I always preach to the banks, try and put, I know the CBN is doing a wonderful job, but for the other banks, try and put women or even men who are, customer friendly. I've met a lot of women that are just scared of walking into a banking hall because of the reception that they get. So please put those very customer-friendly staff at the front desk so that they're able to make our women comfortable when they come to the banks. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, Madam Johnson. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for those short remarks, but powerful, full of nuggets in there. The CBN continues to invest in education. We have our Centers of Excellence projects across different geopolitical zones. We're also training a lot of small and medium-sized businesses on how to structure their businesses, and that's a lot of that includes women. Would be re-emphasizing the tech element of that training, because similar to what Dr. Johnson said about the platform, digital platform being more than just for financial services, but for other social aspects. I think what you've talked about being a platform for networking and a platform to access markets is also very powerful. And of course, it's in line with what you do at the Ministry of Trade and Investment. So if you didn't say that, I'll be very surprised. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And that brings us to the end of this. I think the team would like to have a photo with us, 3, and then they'd like the deputy governors that are around to also join us. So if there's anyone listening to me in the production team, Ngozi, are you there?
Yes, we
are.
Are
they ready?
We are.
Okay.
So would like to start with photography. As we set up the technology, I want to say a thank you to all the beautiful ladies who are on the screen right now. Thank you so much for giving us such insight. It is a rare opportunity for us to have a coffee table chat with a sitting deputy governor, a former minister, and an actual minister of state, all at the same time. It has been incredibly insightful for all of us. Thank you for your time. We would like to take photographs right now. We've learned so much from you. The comment section has been buzzing all through the time that you were speaking. And people have made comments about how excellent the insights are, speaking truth to power and being friendly with customers at the bank, as well as just learning about the origins of WIMBIZ. So right now we're going to take a photograph. Technology, are we ready? So we're starting with our special guests along with the deputy governors who are present at the moment. And we will be taking the photograph in 3 seconds. I'll count us in. 3, 2, 1. Great. Now I would like to take another photograph with only the Deputy Governor FSS, which is Mrs. Aisha Ahmad, our special guest, Dr. Omobola Johnson, as well as our Minister of State for Trade and Industry. If we can just have the 3 ladies and we can take a photograph. And we'll be having the photograph in a countdown of 3. In 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Now we will have the deputy governors of the Central Bank of Nigeria. And we have our deputy governors present, starting with, of course, our amiable, ingenious, super smart, hardworking, accomplished, humane deputy governor, Mrs. Aisha Ahmad. Second to, we will be having the next deputy governor, Mr. Edward Adamu, and then
I think that now, before Dr. Johnson leaves, because she's put off her camera, the Deputy Governor of Operations is here now. We would like to capture him in that shot with her. So can we
Excellent.
have the guest speaker with the DGs? Very important because these are my own supporters here, Dr. Johnson. So they need to be complete. The DG Economic Policy, could you spotlight him as well, please?
yes.
Thank you.
If DGEP is still on, if he could turn his camera on, please. We don't have him on live.
That's fine. Let's take this one.
Yes, we'll take another picture. In 3, 2, 1.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Travel safe. Thank you.
And now would like to take a picture with the panelists and the deputy governors. So if we could have the panelists come up along with our moderator, we'll be taking their pictures with our esteemed deputy governors. And that should be happening in a countdown of 3. So in 3, 2, 1. Excellent.
I think
So
the
we have-
Deputy Governor of Economic Policy is now here. Please spotlight him. He's back up.
Wonderful.
Spotlight him to join the picture, not.
Yes, he's on the screen.
Yeah, and we are all lost now.
We see everybody.
No,
We have
he's
all of
only.
you. We have all the guests, we have all the deputy governors and the panelists.
Okay, because I can only see the DG. I can't see the rest of the panelists.
The tech team have it.
Okay.
So in 3, 2, 1.
Perfect. Now it's perfect. The DG is back. All right, Ngozi, over to you. Thank you all for joining us for the coffee table chat. I think we got a lot out of that engagement. I certainly did. Over to you, Ngozi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So right now, we actually have a video titled Digitize Your Way Up. And it's a central bank video with the female directors talking about how their careers were empowered through digital technology. The video is up next.